Hi, I'm Sadie Solstice. I'm 25 years old, and when I was 18, I went through a domestic violence case where I was stabbed 13 times. So when I was growing up, I was very interested in having a relationship. When I was 15 years old, my parents got divorced. I didn't really have good role models for relationships. And I was also having a rocky relationship with my family where my mom would kick me out of her house and I would go stay at my dad's. And then my dad would kick me out of his house and I would go stay with my mom. And so I really began to bond with this man because I didn't have anywhere else to go. When I was 13, I actually met the man who would later go on to become the father of my child. And we dated for a few months, but it was a middle school relationship, so it was very brief until we reconnected in a romantic way and got back together. I was 17 when I started my relationship with him. Throughout high school, I watched him be in relationships with other girls, and he was not very kind to all of them, but I didn't take it that seriously because I was a high schooler who didn't really know much better. And what I didn't know at the time was that he was love bombing me. Love bombing looks like giving somebody all of the compliments and affirmations, doing sweet things for them and making them feel really, really loved, and even moving too quickly, doing things like saying, "I love you," too quickly than what is appropriate in a relationship. And he was also breadcrumbing me, which is where you give somebody enough love to keep them coming back. You give them just little crumbs of love to keep them coming back until they want more and more and more. You know, due to the family issues that I was having at home, I really did want somebody who made me feel secure and whole and loved and accepted. And this is also why he was able to convince me that as 18-year-olds, it would be a fantastic idea for us to have a baby together, even though we had absolutely no money, nowhere to live, but it would make us a family. And that was something I really wanted. I wanted a child to give all of this love that I had. So with his family history, he grew up with his mom and his stepdad, but he did not know that his stepdad was not his biological dad until he was in about middle school, and I think it really damaged him. We had been casually seeing each other for about a year and only together seriously for maybe 6 weeks before I became pregnant. We were also sleeping in my car most nights because of the family issues that we were both having. It was a rough pregnancy in the beginning, but I decided that I was going to stay full-time at my dad's house so that I could have a bed to sleep in, but my dad did not like him, and so he was not allowed to stay there with me. I also was struggling with morning sickness, and so I would be staying at my dad's house just resting and trying to get through my pregnancy, and he always wanted to be spending time with me and working on the projects that we were working on together, and I couldn't be there, and he didn't understand that or have empathy for me. And then we would be separated at night if I didn't sleep in the car with him, so it was putting a little bit of a strain on our relationship. I noticed red flags before we were in a relationship when I knew him to be in relationships with other girls when we were in high school. And I always suspected that he had bipolar disorder because of the way he acted. He would be very, very manic most of the time, and then he would sleep for 24 hours straight in a depressive episode and go back to being very, very manic. And he didn't have a lot of respect for the girls he dated in the past, and he even had some allegations against him. By the time I entered a relationship with him, I just kind of ignored those things and put on my rose-colored glasses so I wouldn't have to see the red flags right in front of me. My believing that he had changed into a much better person definitely propelled that relationship. So I was actually 3 months pregnant when the attack occurred and when he went to prison. Him and I were spending some time together, and a friend of ours who we were even considering moving in with because we were staying in the car many nights, we went to his house, or his hotel room where he was staying. This is when he asked our friend if he had any, and he gave him a little vial of breath mints, but it had in it, and he licked it off of his hand. That was when he started acting strange, and it kind of propelled the entire situation. I took him back to his parents' house. We were in the car, and I wanted to go back to my dad's house to get rest because I was pregnant and I was tired, and he wanted me to stay with him because he didn't want to be tripping by himself, and he didn't want to be tripping in his parents' house while they were all sleeping. And so we stayed in the car for a while. I fell asleep. I woke up around 4 or 5 in the morning, and I asked him how he was feeling, and he said that he wasn't really feeling the full trip yet, which is strange because it had been so many hours later. And I just figured that he had just developed a tolerance because he was using so regularly. And so I was very thirsty and I wanted to get some water, but I knew none of the gas stations around town were open. I knew that Walmart was closed, and I just wanted to go to the Denny's down the street to get some water and maybe some toast because I was so nauseous. And so that was when he started acting weird, because people who don't know him wouldn't understand this, but he was very, very particular about the type of water that he drank and that he wanted me to drink while I was pregnant. It had to be alkaline, it couldn't be below a certain pH balance, and it had to be heavily filtered. And so drinking tap water at Denny's, normally he would make me drive all over town to try to find water from somewhere else, but he agreed that we should go to Denny's and spend some time there. And so that was my first kind of key that maybe something was wrong. I was 3 months pregnant, so I was feeling exhausted and dealing with morning sickness, and I was very nauseous and didn't feel good at all. Before I became pregnant, I would use with him, not as often as he did, but we would use it as like a spiritual tool. And so I didn't see anything wrong with it at the time, and I didn't realize the effects that it could have on somebody who was also struggling with mental illness. We ended up going to Denny's, and that was when he really started to exhibit some strange behaviors. Nothing too out of the ordinary, but just strange for his normal behavior. For example, he followed me into the woman's bathroom when I went to go use the bathroom, and I told him, "Hey, what are you doing in here? You can't be in here." And he said, "Well, does it really matter?" And I just shrugged it off because I was like, well, it's 5 in the morning and there's nobody here at the Denny's. So I guess no, it doesn't matter if you come into the woman's bathroom with me. And he was just starting to speak strangely about just random things that just didn't sound like him. And so we started to leave, and I realized like he probably just needs some rest. My dad will be leaving for work soon here in the morning, and so we can go to my dad's house because, again, he was not allowed to be in my dad's house. So I knew I had to wait for my dad to leave before we could go there to rest. So we just went and sat outside of his parents' house again in the car for a while. So then I fell back asleep in the car, and I woke up to him grabbing my leg with his hand. It was freezing cold, and he was breathing heavy, like he must have been running around outside because of how cold he was, how out of breath he was. And he told me, "We need to hide." And I said, "What? What do we need to hide from?" And I opened up the moon window and I made him look outside, and I said, "Look around. What do we need to hide from?" And he said, "I don't know, but you're God, right?" And that was when I knew that something was really wrong and that he was having a bad trip. So I reminded him, "No, I'm not God." And he kept asking me, "Is it water? Is it water?" And I thought, he needs to get rest. If he sleeps this off, he'll wake up and he'll be okay. So I started driving to my dad's house, and that was when he started singing it along to the radio, very off key, off pitch, very loudly, off rhythm, in just such a strange way. And when we got to my dad's house, I got us both undressed and I put him into bed. And I was laying next to him trying to get sleep, but he kept asking me questions. "Is it water? Is it water?" And I was just ignoring him because I was so exhausted, so tired, and I was getting fed up with him, to be honest. And so he kept asking me things, talking to me, and I was ignoring him. And that was when he began to attempt to sexually assault me. And so I kicked him off of me. I retreated into my dad's room and locked myself in the bathroom. And he came up and he started jiggling the handle and banging on the door trying to get in. And I heard him walk away, go downstairs, and he was making a ruckus. He was making some loud noises, and I didn't know what was going on, so I thought I would follow him and see what he was doing. And he was in my dad's garage in the toolbox, and he had grabbed a hammer. And I think his intention was he was going to try to take the handle off the door where I had locked myself. So this scared me, and I ripped the hammer out of his hands, and I told him, "You better knock it off or I'm going to mess you up." And he ran upstairs, and I put the hammer away, and I saw my dog that was in the house, and I told her, I might need you. And I walked up the stairs, and he was in my bathroom splashing in the sink and giggling and splashing. And the door was slightly open, and I pushed open the door, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And before I could finish speaking, he punched me in the face. And I fell back into the hall. And this is where my memory gets a little bit foggy, because I have a flash of memory that I don't know how to place. But what makes sense to me is the next part of my memory where I must have gone into the guest room and it was right next to the bathroom, and this door didn't have a lock on it. So I was leaned up against the door with my phone, and I was trying to think of who I should call, because I didn't want to call the police on him, foolishly, because I didn't want him to get in trouble. So I thought I would call some friends of ours, and I was trying to think, who has a car? Who would be able to come and get me? So I called a friend. He didn't answer. I sent him a message. I said, please come help me. He's beating me. We're at my dad's house. And after I sent that message, he barged in, he pushed the door open, and picked me up, threw my phone to the floor, and threw me onto the bed. And he said, pain isn't even real. And he bit my lip as hard as he could. And I started screaming because I wanted him to stop, or I thought maybe my dog would hear me, or if the windows were open, maybe my neighbors would hear me. And he attempted to sexually assault me again until my phone alarm started going off in the corner. And it was freaking him out. And he was like, what is it? What is it? And I said, hey, if you let me up, I can go get it. If you let me up, I will turn it off. And he said, okay. And he let me up. And I turned off the phone alarm, and he asked me again, is it water? And I said, yes, it's water, and I'll go get you some water. You stay here. I'll be right back. So I ran down the stairs, and I saw my dog, and he followed me down the stairs. And I sicked my dog on him. Said, Trixie, get him, Trixie, get him. And she starts jumping on him and trying to bite him. And I ran out of the garage door, opened the car door to the garage, and started to get in my car when I realized I don't have the keys, because my car was a push to start. And because I had a garage, I would leave my keys in the car a lot. But I didn't do that this time. This time they're in my jacket pocket inside. So I had to run in, grab my jacket. And at this time, I was also only wearing a bra and panties because I had been trying to sleep. And so I put my jacket on, and I realized that he's now petting my dog. And he's saying, oh yeah, I forgot I like dogs. And he's petting her, so she's no longer trying to jump on him. And I walk back out to the car, and he follows. And I told him, no, you stay here. I'm getting you water, remember? And he opens the passenger door and starts urinating into the passenger door of my car. So I start backing up and going, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, what the fuck is happening here? And I see my neighbor sitting in the cul-de-sac, and she actually doesn't live in that cul-de-sac. She lives around the corner, like down the block, but she was returning a plate from some cookies that my next door neighbors had made for her. And so she's sitting in her car waiting for them to get back from their walk in the morning. And I waved to her, and she sees me, and she didn't really know what was happening, but she mouthed to me, motioned to me that she was going to call 911. And I don't think that she saw this, but what happened was he picked me up and he pulled me back into the house. And he told me, I know what I need to do. I need to kill you. And he began to strangle me and choked me out until I lost consciousness. And so what happened after that, I don't have any recollection, but I just know what happened based on what was told to me by my neighbors who were there. So what happened was, he had grabbed a kitchen knife out of the butcher block in my dad's kitchen, and he stabbed me 13 times. 17 if you count the defensive wounds on my fingers. I don't. My mom does. And so then my dog actually ran out of the garage doors, ran to my next door neighbor's house, and barked at his door until he came out, and followed her back to my house to make sure that she got in okay and make sure everything was all right because the doors were open. And that's when he walked in and saw me being stabbed. So my attacker got up when he saw my neighbor come in and began running at my neighbor with the knife. And my neighbor slammed the door in his face and began to walk away when he realized I need to go back and make sure that Sadie's okay. And so at that moment, I don't have recollection, but I was conscious when it happened, and I had an adrenaline rush, and I got up and I ran out the back door, and I ran to my other neighbor's house and laid on her couch until the ambulance came for me. And so what happened was my neighbor was able to throw my attacker up against the wall. My other neighbor came in, and they both held him down on the ground. They were able to get the knife out of his hand. They held him down on the ground until the police showed up. And so that was what happened. He stabbed me twice in my abdomen, once in my neck, 2 times in my arm, 3 times in my leg, and the rest of them are on my back. So luckily, the only thing that happened when he stabbed me was obviously I lost blood, and he also punctured my left lung, which needed to have a tube in it to reinflate it, but he completely missed my uterus, missed my baby, and missed all of my other major organs. I 100% blamed the acid that he had taken because I didn't want to accept the fact that the person I loved and trusted the most in this world could do something so horrific to me. And so for 2 years, actually, after this happened, I completely blamed it on the drugs. It took me a long time to actually accept that he was responsible for his actions and not just the drugs. But what really did it for me was the way that he treated me when I would speak to him on the phone while he was in prison. Because when you talk to somebody on the phone who's an inmate, you have to pay for it. So I would be paying, and mind you, I was a single teen mother and I was not really working, and I would be paying to 12 cents a minute to speak on the phone with him just for him to degrade me and make me feel like I was doing something wrong. I just realized I'm paying money for this and I really like myself. Why am I letting him speak to me this way and make me feel down about myself? And that was really what snapped me out of it and made me start to realize that there was no excuse that he could give me for the way that he hurted me. So the state of Colorado takes over in domestic violence cases because it happens so often where, you know, a victim would be abused by their partner and then they would not press charges and then the partner would end up killing them. And so it's law in Colorado now that the state takes over in any domestic violence case. So the district attorneys were the ones who pressed charges. He was initially arrested on 2 attempted murder charges, one for me and one for my neighbor, menacing a deadly weapon, obstruction of telephone service for not letting me call for help, kidnapping because he dragged me back into the house after I tried to escape, attempted sexual assault, 2 of those, and strangulation, assault, and I believe those were all the charges that he was arrested on. He ended up taking a plea deal after a long time of being in court and him initially planning to go to trial and try to explain to a jury that this was an accident and that he was on drugs and he didn't mean it. He finally realized the severity of what he had done and took a plea deal. So the actual charges that he were arrested on were fictitious charges because the district attorneys and the public defender needed to agree on a sentencing range. And so they needed to create these fictitious charges to sentence him with in order to get that range. And then once they agreed on that and he took his plea deal, we went to court and the judge ruled how much of the sentencing range he needed to actually do. And it had already been about 2 years that he had been in jail waiting for his sentence, and he was able to get time served, and so he was sentenced to 13 years total with time served. He's up for parole in January, and it terrifies me that he could potentially be a free man and have the ability to try to be involved in my life or my child's life. Domestic violence was something I was scared of happening to me because I just know so many women that it has happened to, but at the same time, I never really did think that it would happen to me, and I didn't realize the risky positions I was putting myself in, and I just thought it would be fine and that nothing bad. When you're 18, you don't think anything bad will ever happen to you. Since this happened to me, it's caused post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've gone through therapy and I've done a lot of personal development, gone to seminars, read a lot of books to try to better myself so that I can better handle this disorder that I now have because of this traumatic event. And in the beginning, after I finally realized that I didn't want to be with this person anymore who did this horrible thing to me, I did make very poor choices in partners after that because comparing them to him, nobody can do any wrong compared to the person that brutally attacked you and stabbed you. And so I made poor choices in partners until I finally made a list and realized the type of person that I want to be with. And I just kind of kept that list aside and had it in mind and visualized meeting the person that would treat me right. And I've been with my current partner now for 2.5 years, and he treats me much better. I could have died, and it was no thanks to him that I'm still alive. It's thanks to my dog who ran to get help and my neighbors who came in and were able to subdue my attacker. If it wasn't because of them, I would definitely not be alive today. And so that also helped me realize that he doesn't deserve forgiveness, because if it were up to him, I would be dead right now. I definitely think it's a possibility that he will reach out to me and even maybe try to file for custody of our child, but I'm putting measures in place to make sure that he will not get access to my child. After this happened to me, I actually came together with my friends to create a brand called Get Life, and it's meant to inspire people to live life like there's no tomorrow, because you just never know when your last moment on this planet is going to be. And so I've been helping people in my community check off their bucket list items and be able to travel and just live full time and do the things that they want to do. And by sharing my story, I'm hoping that I can encourage everyone to just live life to the fullest, live life by design, and do everything that you want to do now. So I've definitely had a lot of stress nightmares that he comes back into my life or is out of prison and trying to hurt me again. So that's definitely been a huge part of my post-traumatic stress. And I definitely carry my stress physically as well. So it's taken an actual physical toll on my body carrying that stress. And it has affected my relationships since then. You know, I've found it hard to trust people, and most people in a relationship, you're worried that your partner is going to, you know, be unfaithful to you. And I have to have this added extra worry of what if this person ends up hurting me or killing me? It's statistically your partner is the person who is most likely to kill you in the event that you are killed. And the number one cause of death in pregnant people is actually homicide. I found myself being very hypervigilant and looking for those red flags and not putting on the rose-colored glasses, and seeing people truly for who they are as opposed to the person that I want them to be, or trying to see the good in everyone, because I am an optimist and I do prefer to see the good in everyone, but I've been more vigilant about seeing people for who they truly are. And the thing that I always tell people now is don't tell your prospective partners about any past abuse that you may have endured from other partners, because it puts a target on your back. And so don't open yourself up to be a target, and tell them, set a high expectation. Tell them all of your previous partners treated you like a princess or a prince.